where progress is influenced by revolution and evolution. We're today's News Talk, TNT.
We are now joined by independent journalist and funny man Matt Baker. Matt, let's start internet censorship and arrest. Let's start with Pavel Durov. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Now, I'm hearing a lot of different reports. In the very beginning, when I saw this guy was arrested, I just took a little screenshot out, put it on Twitter. Hey, anybody got the scoop? And no one seemed to have the scoop other than the fact that he had been arrested. There were these interviews of him talking about his platform, some of which included him talking about one of his engineers being approached about a job with U.S. intelligence and basically giving a backdoor or creating a backdoor in the Telegram system. He also discussed how he refused to give backdoors to governments. And of course, the speculation was that arrest was about those subjects. Now, as far as I know from what's being reported, he hasn't been indicted yet, but the charges that they're looking at are the type of charges where he is conspiring in child pornography rings and selling drugs. Now, those things, as abhorrent as they are, occur on every social media platform. Some of the biggest out there. I can't go to my Facebook marketplace right now here in the great state of Iowa where marijuana is illegal and not see advertisements for not only marijuana, but magic mushrooms as well. No one's shutting down that marketplace, Matt. And the Zuck, I don't think he is in any trouble of being arrested at any moment. So baseline, what are your thoughts on this? What kind of charges, indictments are we going to see? And is this now going to become the norm when you challenge the system whatsoever?
Well, I think that's where they're going with it. And by the way, I'm back, bitches. I'm back from my vacation. You're going to be seeing me again. So you're going to have to get used to this ugly mug coming back on your screen. Yeah, I think that's basically the precedent they're setting. I mean, you look at England and what they're doing. You look at England, what they're doing where they're basically arresting people for saying things online or even retweeting something. Like someone sends you a clip and it's like, this guy, raped this person, and it might have the name wrong or something. And they go, oh, you're spreading misinformation. And now it's hate speech because this particular ethnicity is involved. And then now you're getting rounded up and put in jail. And then when the judges are talking to these people, they're like literally talking to them like they killed children. They're just like, this is so serious. Like I'm sorry, we have to incarcerate you right away. There's no way we can let this kind of thing go. Like people talking about real things online. And so then they started threatening Americans. I don't know if you've seen this, but they were like, we're going to arrest and extradite Americans now for spreading misinformation or disinformation or malinformation online. And we're all like, screw you. And then you think it's a joke, but in reality, I mean, the way the EU set up, like they're all connected. So they're a monolithic group. So you could be like, oh, England, but then you end up going on a vacation to France. And then the next thing you know, the gendarmes coming by and they're grabbing, oh, oui, monsieur, you're spreading hate speech. Or actually, they probably have Muslim accents at this point in time. But anyway, so they round you up and then you're in jail over there. Like, we told you you were going to be arrested for spreading and misinformation, because I have connections to people in Ireland and England, and I'm sharing things with them back and forth. It's like international conspiracy to commit, digital terrorism. Like, you don't think they'll do that? That's what they're set. That's the precedent they're setting here. This guy, unless I'm missing something, I don't think he's actually doing the child trafficking. It's just his platform happens to be a free speech encrypted platform. And now they're saying basically anything that ever happens on your platform, you're now guilty for. And, I said this before Trump got censored, and we all then ended up getting censored and everyone lost their accounts. He should have said in the very beginning, if you're a communications platform and you're communicating in America, you will abide by the First Amendment, period, or do business elsewhere. And that's what we need to do.
Well, let me say this, number one, I'm not so sure there isn't access to the private messages or, people's accounts. I know they're talking about backdoors in the approach, but
there's a lot of talk about backdoors going on. I know that.
Well, I'm just saying, if they do have backdoors and access in that manner, the only way to get the information on somebody that they're investigating out is for a massive leak, right? And they have to make it anonymous, and it has to look like a hacker. They bend the knee, and now all of a sudden they can, go after specific individuals and have access, say the same way that people thought that their encrypted conversations on Signal here in this country, when you talk about the Oath Keepers and the January 6ers that use it, they were secure. They were not. Obviously, there is access there, and now we can put that into the court system, the legal system. So I think just the very fact that he's not working with the legal system is the reason that they have gone after him. They don't like the fact that, look, I'll be honest, I'm not a big Telegram guy, but people like Whitney Webb are. I utilized it when I was over at RVM. I definitely see the appeal of the platform. It's more Eurocentric, and actually we saw after the arrest, it only got more popular, right? It's that Streisand effect. So look, I think on one end, this is absolutely horrible, and these are obviously political persecutions. But on the other end, if somehow, some way this guy can weather the storm, maybe, just maybe, Telegram becomes the platform we've all been promised X is going to be.
Well, that would be nice, but knowing the way these bastards work, I would not be surprised if they basically put him in a cell and, did some form of torture, whether it was physical or mental abuse, to put him in and scare him into be like, oh, you're going to be locked away forever. You're going to do ball with us, play ball. And then basically give us access to the back door, as you keep saying. And then pretty much all of these so-called encrypted conversations that you've been having with each other are now going to be somehow, like you say, leaked maybe a few months down the road, like, oopsie, they got leaked. And it will be basically cover for him if he gets out and he gets off on these things, because these countries don't play by our rules. They don't have freedom of speech laws. And basically Elon Musk now is under the same thing, as much as we hate on him. If he flies over there now, what's to stop them grabbing him and charging him with the same things? I got to say to everyone, if you think you're on an encrypted platform, I mean, I never use encrypted platforms. My theory is, if you're on an encrypted platform and you're like FBI, CIA, and there is a backdoor, that's where they're looking. And everyone gets a little bit looser lipped on these platforms. Always assume you're being watched. I hate to live in this world, but just always assume everything is being watched all the time. Okay? Don't be like, oh, we're on an encrypted thing, so I'm going to say blah, blah, blah. No, dude, don't do that. Because they're basically kettling you into an area where they can focus the attention of these guys want to speak quietly. And why do they want to speak quietly? So they can look there with their fine-tooth comb and find exactly what they're looking for, certain key phrases that you wouldn't say on other platforms that you might, because you think you're on an encrypted platform.
Now, the bottom line is, we also know that not just the United States government, but governments throughout the world do have an online presence, and there are investigations that happen. So again, we'd have to be so naive to act like they could not have a sting on people distributing child pornography when you see someone like Alex Rosen on a daily basis with a ragtag of about 4 or 5 people across a slew of message boards and across a slew of platforms, getting these people to not only admit it sometimes, but admit that they have that stuff on their phone and then show it to law enforcement officers right there.
It's mind-boggling what he does. Alex Rose is the man.
Yeah, he does it all the time. I watch it. Now imagine law enforcement doing that same thing, but when they get the first individual in there, they say, we want access to your account. Now, they don't necessarily have to give it up, but if you're looking for a plea bargain, et cetera, and they say, listen, if you cooperate, this is what we're going to give you. Once you have access to that person's account, you're going to have access to other criminals and pedophiles and drug dealers. And you
or right-wing extremists.
I mean, I guess I've watched a little too much Law and Order. This is baseline. It's not even Law and Order. It's every time you watch any of these real investigation documentary shows, they always talk about going after the little guy. So the idea that they can't run these investigations, or somehow they're being obfuscated or stifled by Pavel, is absolutely ludicrous because, like, as we said, these things are happening across the board on major platforms where they already have that access.
Yeah, and I mean, what are we going to do? Like I said, I'm kind of easing up on Elon until the election's over. I'm easing up on Trump. Everything's good. I'm on Team Humanity. We're going. Let's get past the election, guys. Can we get past the election before we start doing the infighting? And, so without X even not being totally free speech, some of these people in England just wouldn't be able to communicate at all. So some of them have burner accounts and they can share this information around because it's been completely squashed in Britain and France and all these other countries. And if you look at the way they're cracking down on it, that shows how dangerous it is to the establishment. The establishment is very scared of the people actually having free speech. And that's why free speech is the First Amendment. And that's why we have to absolutely stand for it. And if we could create a global standard for free speech where they couldn't get to people or shut down platforms based on this, there has to be some kind of global internet Bill of Rights that we're going to have to get through. And basically,
I'm always hesitant any type of global treaties or governance. Let me just say that. Yeah, when we look at freedom of speech, you need only look to Hong Kong and how everybody stopped talking about Hong Kong all the way 5 years ago prior to the COVID 1984 nightmare. People were out in the streets. They didn't like the CCP in China taking over. Go see where it was today. Normally, this would be the time for the protests and people out there. Not a soul. So unfortunately, when we're talking global, I don't know if I want that type of free speech because we're seeing it hammered down, not just in these European nations, but these nations that have, again, you look at Hong Kong, it was basically a colony for 100 years under the United Kingdom and Britain and had to be put over. Well, the CCP won. And look, I'm not a Chinaphobe either, but I don't want any treaties, rules, and regulations where my free speech is dependent on any type of their system. We got to take a quick break for the headlines. We're gonna jump into other systems. We're gonna jump into some RFK Jr., some Trump, and beyond. We're with Matt Baker. More TNT after this.
Great news! Good news, everyone!
TNT Radio News.
Matt Boyland here with a look at your TNT headlines. The US Supreme Court's reinstated part of a law in Arizona that demands residents provide proof of American citizenship if they want to vote in the state. Bombshell new videos surfaced showing former US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi on the day of the January 6 Capitol attack, admitting fault for not securing the building. And Israel's released footage showing its forces rescuing a hostage from inside Gaza. He's the 8th person to be rescued by Israeli forces since the war began.
Instead of putting a cracker under a politician, why not some TNT? Today's News Talk, TNT.
We were having a little convo during the break on what might be a solution if we didn't have this global adherence to a certain set of standards on free speech. And I argued to Matt that in this country, we're already supposed to have the freest of speech that cannot be impeded on and the right to worship who we want. So, as a solution, I would say this, first of all, we've got to get our own house in order. But the baseline of that freedom of speech should only be shared with our allies. In other words, if you want, the way that we export that to the rest of the world is if you want to be our true ally, and I'm no NATO guy and I'm not trying to make a global alliance, but at the very least, bare minimum, you are going to adopt our level of free speech under that First Amendment in a meaningful way. And right there, if we're talking about military strength, the problem is that we're now beyond kinetic military strength. In other words, boots on the ground, drone warfare, killing people, into real information war. And that's why I think those allegiances at the end would be broken, because they couldn't adhere to the type of free speech that we should have in this country and around the world. Those are just my thoughts. I'm not trying to be negative. I don't know if there's an actual solution, but if we could do it here and export it to our allies, I think that would be a big step forward.
I agree with you. I mean, when you put it out there like that, you figure if we did actually come up with some kind of global compact, it would be like, you can say everything, but you can't say this or that or the other. And then we would be screwed because we'd be under the global contract. But in a perfect world, at least that you say bare bones, the people we do business with. How about bare bones? Americans cannot be arrested in foreign countries for exercising our free speech in our country when we're disseminating through our platforms that exist here in America. If we're speaking here and it gets broadcast out into the universe, that's your fault for allowing it into your country. We're allowed to speak here, and if you happen to hear it, that's on you. You cannot, and you will be under serious, sanctions or possible military, hostage negotiations. Like, you can't arrest Americans for exercising their free speech in our country. If Trump came out and said that, that would make me a lot happier. Now we can move on.
Yeah, but he also wants to arrest people for burning the flag, and that's a whole nother issue that I got into yesterday. I'm a free speech absolutist.
Do not talk about the Jews, or you will be arrested.
He wants to round up the people. I said I wasn't going to talk bad about Trump. Trump's amazing. He's incredible. Fantastic.
Let's get into Trump and RFK Jr. because we haven't chatted in a while. We haven't even been on air since the Trump assassination attempt. But you do have RFK Jr. now stepping onto the Trump train, rolling down the tracks. A lot of people had assumed that maybe the HHS position, Secretary of State, something like that, CIA director gets floated out there. There's a conversation between RFK Jr. and Tucker Carlson about it. Tucker asked him if he would dismantle the agency. He basically says he would not, that he would rein it in, but then we would also have the supposed commission where all of these things would be declassified in a rapid fashion. Number one, do you think that's a possibility? And number two, does that make RFK Jr. maybe even a bigger threat than Trump at this point? Because you would imagine there could not be a Michael Pompeo to sway him not to declassify certain things.
Well, just to get it out of the bat here, I liked RFK. I know he's got his problems. I've met the man. I've shook his hand. He spoke at a lot of the freedom rallies when we were going out against the vaccine. He created the movie, Anthony Fauci, the real Anthony Fauci, the books. He's been railing against the vaccine and the RNA and Fauci, who I hate. Fauci! Anyway, and so I'm all about it. And personally, I think it's a great move for them to connect. And listening to RFK talk about how he wants to be together in unity over specific things and not really focus on the problems we have, because he sees an existential threat to our country. Based if Camel Toe gets in, they are basically going to get rid of all due process when it comes to elections. We already all know or suspect heavily, in our opinion, that the last election was stolen. And now if they bring it down to, now we don't even vote. There's no primaries. We don't have debates. We don't have press conferences. We just basically create a media hype like they did with COVID, funnily enough, and then just get everybody completely mesmerized by this character and then just install them in. Even Gavin Newsome was joking about it, like, hey, I don't know how that happened, but we're all supposed to say it's normal. It's not normal. And regardless of who she is as a person or what she represents is the absolute destruction of American elections. And it will be such a black pill and so demoralizing to the American people that a lot of people will probably completely give up voting at that point in time. And God forbid people start doing any kind of other thing, because they feel like when there is no peaceful solution, they may turn to other directions. And as Jason and I are trying to keep things very peaceful, we would really appreciate it if we can still actually have a voice in this country by our votes. I like RFK. I'm glad to see the unity.
So you just mentioned Gavin Newsome there. And the fact, and you were referring to this interview on this podcast where for about a minute, they all kind of sit around and joke about the fact that Kamala Harris just got undemocratically fast-tracked and installed as the presumptive nominee. And like you said, I mean, Newsome acknowledged that this is about the third time in the last 6 months or so that he's just outwardly acknowledged what a POS he is and his party is. First, there was the China moment where he's in a press conference and he's like, a lot of people are going to say that we cleaned up California for Xi Jinping. And that would be true. I mean, he literally says it. Yeah. And then you've got this moment where he's literally talking about how democratic the process was, giggling with these guys. And now you also have this clip where he's confronted on the homeless and crime problem in California. And he goes, well, clearly because of the policies that we've adopted. So, I mean, is there no shame in the Christian Bale lookalike serial killer game when it comes to Gavin Newsom?
Gavin NWO scum. Yeah, man. I was really surprised that they didn't put him in, but really the whole thing came down to Camel Toe had the war chest because she was still on the ticket. So they had, I forget, it was $100 million or something. So they basically needed that to launder that money into her campaign. And they basically went, oh, black woman. Okay, we'll get her in. And my God, to see the power of that media machine just wind up. Gavin Newsom is such a scumbag. I mean, people that look in that guy's face and see anything but an absolute serial killer, like complete sociopath, lunatic, madman, are lost, completely lost. Who even knows if people are voting for them at this point? Because California is kind of in the position that America will be in, where we love California. A lot of us Californians, we love it, except for the politics. So people assume, they go, well, that's what you voted for. It's like, no, that's not what I voted for. And sometimes I wonder if that's what any of us are really voting for. We're all under this mind spell that, well, it's California and everything's just going to be gay and commie all the time. And so there's really nothing you can do about it. But when you see a person like Gavin Newsom in there and with no real opposition to him, we tried to get him out and he won 1 trillion votes and he was like the more votes than he ever got again, as usual. I mean, they've had this election fraud system tied up forever in California. And I think it's just now starting to be exposed. I think if we actually start pulling at the threads, we'll see that California was probably one of the test beds and New York one of the test beds where they just started, how can we fix these elections? How can we get in there? How can we fudge the numbers? How can we do the mail-in ballots? How can we ballot harvest? And they've been like figuring this system out, and now they've exported it to the entire country. And if they get Camel Toe in, trust me, it's going to be a death blow to democracy. They're always talking about democracy, and Camel Toe never got one vote. There was no primary. She was the most unpopular person when it came to the primary with Biden in the previous election, and she was the most.
That is democracy. Hold on, that is democracy in the Democratic Party in 2024. Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here, and if you enjoyed that segment, I want to let you know that I am live 5 days a week over at TNT.news, and if you go there, you can also interact in the chat. It is 3 to 5 Eastern Time. We are global, baby. So again, if you dug that segment, please come check me out every Monday through Friday at TNT.news.